The first thing you should know about interplanetary bazaars is that a smile can get you killed. Or worse, married. I'd been to 37 worlds across 4 galaxies, survived 3 crash landings and 1 civil war. But nothing prepared me for what happened when I flashed my teeth at the wrong female on Velthera. My name is Ryan Vale, former Earth Special Survival Forces, current freelance spacecraft engineer, and, as of today, apparently the most wanted genetic match in the known universe. All because I smiled at a woman who could bench press a shuttle. The Bazaar of Beasts sprawled across Velthera's equator, like a gaudy metallic rash, the largest trading hub this side of the Ryal Sanctum. Technically, neutral territory. Though everyone knew, it operated under the shadow influence of the 3 major powers. The Zarn Alliance with their cybernetic obsession, the Malaros Empire with their beast warrior heritage, and the Ryal Sanctum with their spiritual mumbo-jumbo that somehow controlled half the known energy sources in the galaxy. I was just passing through. Honest. My old Terran-built ship needed a new gravitational compensator, and Velthera was known for parts you couldn't find anywhere else, legal or otherwise. 15,000 credits for this piece of junk? I haggled with a long-eared Zarnian female at a food stall adjacent to the parts district. I could buy half a new engine for that. Then go buy half an engine, human, she replied, her translucent ears twitching with amusement. See how far that gets you through the veiled nebula. I leaned against her counter, enjoying the banter. The bazaar hummed around us, a symphony of 1,000 species trading, arguing, and occasionally trying to scam each other out of their valuables. The air smelled of exotic spices, machine oil, and the unmistakable tang of too many bodies packed in too little space. How about 12,000, and you throw in one of those? I pointed to a purple fruit that resembled an earth mango crossed with an octopus. She snorted. 13.5, and I'll consider not poisoning it. I laughed, showing my teeth in what we humans consider a friendly gesture. That's when I noticed her eyes widen in alarm, fixed on something behind me. Too late. I turned, and found myself staring at the most magnificent and terrifying female I'd ever seen. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, she had the powerful build of a lioness, with the upright posture of a human. Golden fur rippled over corded muscles. Her face combined feline features with disturbingly human intelligence in amber eyes. A Malaros warrior, and judging by the ornate metal badges adorning her minimal battle harness, a high-ranking one. She'd been passing by our stall when my laugh caught her attention. Now, those predatory eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my survival instincts scream. I did what any self-respecting human would do when confronted by an apex predator. I smiled wider. That was my first mistake. Her massive hand shot out faster than I could track, closing around my throat. My feet dangled helplessly as she lifted me to eye level. "You dare?" she growled, her voice deep enough to vibrate through my bones. "I'm sorry," I choked out, genuinely confused. "Did I step on your tail?" Something flickered in those amber eyes, surprise, perhaps even a hint of amusement, before narrowing into slits. "You have chosen Combat Mating Challenge," she announced, loud enough for the now silent crowd gathering around us to hear. "I accept." What happened next is still a blur in my memory. One moment, I was dangling like a fish on a hook. The next, I was airborne, sailing across 3 market stalls before crashing through what I later learned was a very expensive display of Ryal relics. The last thing I remember was the sound of alarmed shouts, the taste of blood in my mouth, and the absurd thought that I really should have paid the 15,000 credits for the damn part. Then darkness took me. I awoke to the bitter taste of something being poured down my throat and the gentle hum of medical equipment. A Ryul healing chant played softly from hidden speakers, all rhythm and no melody, designed to synchronize with human neural patterns. "Drink it all, spacer, unless you want those 3 broken ribs to heal crooked." I forced my eyes open. A woman sat beside my bed, holding a flask of glowing blue liquid. Not human, but close. Her skin had a faint violet undertone, and her eyes were entirely black, lacking visible irises. Her hair fell in silver braids adorned with tiny data crystals. "What hit me?" I groaned, though I remembered perfectly well. "Some things you don't forget." "General Tharka of the Malaros 7th Battle Pride," she replied, an amused smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "And, from what witnesses say, you practically begged her to do it." I sat up, wincing as my ribs protested. "By smiling. Where I come from. That's just being friendly." "Where you come from doesn't matter here." She pressed me back down with surprising strength. In Malaros culture, direct eye contact while displaying teeth to an adult female is either a mating challenge or a death challenge. You're lucky she chose the former. "Lucky?" I spluttered. "She threw me across the bazaar." "Yes, rather than disemboweling you on the spot," she shrugged. "Like I said, lucky." I took a moment to process this information while examining my surroundings. We were in a small medical chamber, but not a public facility. The walls were covered in tapestries, depicting what looked like ancient battle scenes interspersed with star charts. Definitely private. "Where am I, and who are you?" "My establishment. The Black Vein Bar. Best information and worst drinks in the bazaar." She tapped one of the data crystals in her hair. "I'm Mira. I pulled you out of the wreckage before the bazaar security forces arrived." "Why would you do that?" Her entirely black eyes revealed nothing. "Because the moment Tharka threw you, she disappeared. And when a Malaros general publicly issues a combat mating challenge and then vanishes, people get curious, especially when the challenge was issued to a species they've never chosen before." I frowned. "I'm hardly the first human to visit Velthera. You're the first human a Malaros battle general has ever selected for genetic connection rights." Mira leaned forward. "Which means either something very interesting is happening, or you're about to become the center of an interstellar incident. Either way, information worth trading." Great. I'd somehow become a political commodity in a culture I barely understood. "I'm just a ship engineer looking for parts," I protested. "I have no interest in genetic connection rights with a woman who used me as a projectile weapon." Mira's laugh was surprisingly melodic. "Oh, Spacer, your interest isn't required. What matters is that Tharka's actions have already upset the delicate balance between the three powers. The Zarn want to understand the genetic compatibility she sensed in you to create perfect soldiers. The Ryul Sanctum fears you might activate the ancient warrior bloodline and disrupt their spiritual order. And half the Malaros Empire thinks you've dishonored their general. And the other half believes she's granted you blood bond rights, something forbidden to outsiders for 10 generations. I groaned and fell back against the pillow. "All this because I smiled." "All this because you smiled at the wrong female at the wrong time," Mira corrected. "Though between us, I suspect there's more to it. Tharka isn't known for impulsive actions." Before I could question her further, an alarm sounded. 3 short pulses, followed by a long one. Mira's expression tightened. "Security sweep, can you walk?" "Probably not without screaming," I admitted. "Then this will hurt." She slid one arm under my shoulders and helped me to my feet. Pain shot through my side, but I bit back a cry. She guided me through a hidden door behind one of the tapestries, into a narrow corridor lined with pipes and conduits. "Service tunnels," she explained. "They run beneath the entire bazaar. Used to be maintenance only. Now they're the backbone of the information trade." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere to hide you until I figure out why 3 different factions suddenly want your DNA." We hobbled through the dimly lit passage, the sounds of the bazaar a distant murmur overhead. I tried to memorize our route, but after the 5th identical junction, I gave up. "Why are you helping me?" I asked between labored breaths. Mira didn't look back. "I told you, information trade." "There's more to it. She paused at an intersection, checking a holographic display embedded in her wrist. Let's just say I recognized the look of someone caught in a game they didn't sign up for. Before I could press further, the distant sound of boots on metal reached us. Mira cursed in what sounded like ancient Ryul and pulled me into an alcove barely large enough for one person, let alone two. Her body pressed against mine, and I tried not to wince as my ribs protested. "Don't breathe," she whispered. A patrol of armored figures marched past our hiding spot. Zarn enforcers, judging by their mechanically enhanced limbs and the distinctive blue glow of their optical implants. They paused at the junction, scanning in all directions with sensors that would certainly detect our body heat. Mira's hand slipped to a small device at her belt. She pressed something, and suddenly the temperature in our alcove plummeted. I shivered uncontrollably as frost formed on my eyelashes. But the Zarn patrol moved on, their sensors detecting nothing but machinery. "Thermal dampener," Mira explained as the temperature slowly returned to normal. "Useful toy, but we've got about 3 minutes before hypothermia sets in. Let's move." We continued through the maze of tunnels until we reached what appeared to be a dead end. Mira placed her palm against a seemingly random section of wall, and a door slid open, revealing a small but well-appointed room. "Welcome to my real office," she said, helping me to a couch that looked like it had been salvaged from a luxury cruiser. "The bar is just for public consumption. This is where the actual work happens." I sank gratefully onto the couch, noting the walls lined with data terminals and holographic displays showing various parts of the bazaar. A weapons rack held an impressive collection that would make my former Special Forces commander salivate. "You're more than a bartender," I observed. "And you're more than an engineer," she countered, activating a medical scanner and running it over my injuries. "Ex-military, based on how you move. Special operations, probably survival specialist. Discharged, but not dishonorably. You don't have that bitter edge. Now freelance, taking odd jobs while seeing the universe." I raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an analysis." "Information is currency here." She administered another injection that immediately dulled the pain in my ribs. "Now, let's talk about why General Tharka chose you." "I have no idea. Never met her before today." "Yet she recognized something in you. Something that made her break centuries of tradition." Mira pulled up a holographic display, showing the incident from multiple angles. I watched myself sailing through the air with a strange detachment. She froze the image on Tharka's face just after she threw me. "Look at her expression. That's not rage. That's calculation." I studied the image. Behind the fierce snarl, the Malaros general's eyes held a focus that didn't match her violent action. She wanted to create a scene, I realized. "Precisely. But why?" Mira expanded the display to show the crowd's reaction. "And why did she disappear immediately after?" Before I could speculate, one of the monitors flashed red. Mira's attention snapped to it, her expression darkening. "Well, this complicates things." She expanded the feed to show the central plaza of the bazaar. A massive crowd had gathered, and at its center stood the unmistakable figure of General Tharka. Even through the grainy security feed, her presence commanded attention. She wore formal battle regalia now, ornate armor accentuating her powerful frame, ceremonial weapons at her belt. "Turn up the audio," I requested. Tharka's voice filled the room, a resonant growl that carried authority without effort. "By the ancient combat traditions of Malaros, he has defeated me. I claim him as my battle mate by blood right." The crowd erupted in chaos. I could make out shouts of outrage, confusion, and what sounded like religious chanting. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. Mira's expression was unreadable. "It means, Spacer, that you've just become the first non-Malaros in 3 centuries to be granted genetic compatibility rights with their warrior caste." "I didn't defeat her. She threw me across the market." "And you survived. with a smile on your face, according to witnesses. Mira zoomed in on another portion of the recording. My unconscious form. Blood trickling from my mouth. Lips curled in what could indeed be interpreted as a smile. In Malaros culture, that's practically a declaration of superior genetic resilience. I dropped my head into my hands. This is insane. It gets worse. Mira switched feeds to show 3 different groups converging on the plaza. Zarn Research Division, Ryul Spiritual Counselors, and what appears to be a splinter faction of Malaros traditionalists. All heading for the one place you don't want to be. Why would a splinter faction of her own people oppose this? Because some believe their bloodline should remain pure. A battlemate claim to an alien, especially a human, is practically heresy to them. I stood, ignoring the pain. We need to leave, now. Too late. Mira pointed to another screen, showing armored figures moving through the service tunnels. They're already searching the maintenance level, and they'll have locked down all departures from the Bazaar. Then what do we do? Mira's black eyes met mine, a strange determination in them. We find out what Tharka really wants with you before someone decides you're more valuable dissected than alive. A plan began to form in my mind. It was reckless, possibly suicidal. But then again, I'd already survived being thrown across a market by an 8-foot lioness. You said this is about genetic compatibility, right? I asked. That's the public claim, yes. Then I need to understand what that actually means. I gestured to her data terminals. Show me everything you have on Malaros battle rights and genetic bonding. Mira raised an eyebrow but complied. Planning to consummate the relationship already. I ignored her jab, focusing on the information flowing across the screens. Diagrams of Malaros physiology, historical accounts of battle-mating rituals, genetic analyses of cross-species compatibility. There, I pointed to a recurring symbol in the ancient texts. What's that? Mira enlarged the image. A spiral pattern with 3 distinct branches. The Blood Covenant. It's a Malaros religious symbol, representing their genetic destiny. The 3 branches symbolize strength, honor, and something that doesn't translate well. Perhaps evolutionary purpose. I studied the symbol, a half-formed memory tugging at my consciousness. I've seen this before. Impossible! These texts aren't accessible to outsiders. Not in texts. I closed my eyes, picturing the memory. During my military service, we were deployed to an uncharted moon as part of a recovery operation. The objective was classified, but I remember seeing this symbol carved into ancient ruins. Mira's expression shifted from skepticism to intense interest. What else do you remember? Not much. We were attacked before completing the mission. Some kind of automated defense system. I was one of 3 survivors. I opened my eyes. The mission was scrubbed. All records classified. Interesting coincidence, Mira mused. That you would encounter a Malaros sacred symbol years before meeting one. I don't believe in coincidences, I replied. Neither do I. She pulled up another file. Especially since Tharka was stationed in that same sector 8 years ago, leading an expedition to recover what they called ancestral technology. The pieces began to align in a pattern I didn't like. You think she recognized me somehow? That's impossible. We never made contact with any Malaros forces. Perhaps not you specifically, but something about you. Mira's fingers danced across the interface. Human genetic patterns are unusual in this galaxy. More adaptable than most species. A new alert flashed on our screens. They've started a sector-by-sector search. We have maybe an hour before they reach this section. I paced the small room, ignoring the pain in my side. I need to talk to Tharka directly. That's suicide. Maybe, but it's the fastest way to get answers. I turned to face her. Can you get a message to her, privately? Mira hesitated, then nodded. I can try, But even if she agrees to meet, getting you to her without being captured by one of the other factions, I'll worry about that part. I gestured to her weapons rack. I assume you're not just collecting those for decoration? A slow smile spread across her face. I knew I liked you for a reason, Spacer. She selected a sleek pistol and handed it to me. Neural disruptor. Non-lethal but effective. The charge only lasts for about 20 shots, so make them count. I checked the weapon, appreciating its balance. Any chance you have something a little more substantial? Planning to start a war? She asked, though she was already reaching for a larger weapon. Just preparing for contingencies. I accepted the compact rifle she offered. And in my experience, it's better to have options. Speaking of options, she produced a small metallic disc. Emergency transponder. If you're captured, activate it. I might be able to track you. Might? Depends who captures you. She shrugged. Zarn have signal jammers. Ryul have spatial distortion fields. And Malaros traditionalists will probably just eat the transponder, along with parts of you. Comforting. Mira sent the message while I prepared, strapping the weapons to my body and testing my mobility. The pain medication was working wonders, though I knew I'd pay for it later when the effects wore off. Message sent, Mira announced. Now we wait. The response came faster than either of us expected. A simple set of coordinates, and a time. 1 hour from now. That's in the old ceremonial hall, Mira noted, pulling up a map. Central location, multiple access points, but also heavily monitored. Can you disable the surveillance? Temporarily, yes, but it will alert security. I nodded. That's fine. I just need a few minutes with her. Mira studied me with those impenetrable black eyes. You realize this could be a trap? Of course it could. I checked the neural disruptor one final time. But if she wanted me dead, she would have killed me in the market. Unless she needs a more private setting for whatever she has planned. I smiled despite myself. Always looking on the bright side, aren't you? In my line of work, paranoia is a survival trait. She handed me a small vial. Stimulant. For when the pain medication wears off. Be careful with the dosage. Too much will stop your heart. Noted. I tucked it into a pocket. Any other cheerful advice before I go? Mira paused, her expression softening slightly. Whatever Tharka wants from you, it's significant enough to risk her position and possibly her life. The Malaros don't break tradition lightly. So I shouldn't either, I concluded. Just remember that in their culture, battle and mating are intertwined concepts. What looks like aggression might be something else entirely. With that encouraging thought, I prepared to enter the service tunnels. Mira provided me with a basic map marked with security checkpoints to avoid. Good luck, Spacer, she said as the hidden door slid open. Try not to start an interstellar incident. Too late for that, I replied with a wink, then slipped into the dimly lit passageway. Navigating the maintenance tunnels proved more challenging than I anticipated. Twice, I had to hide from security patrols, pressing myself into service alcoves as armored figures passed by. Once, I was forced to double back when I encountered a Zarn research team, setting up what looked like genetic scanning equipment. The stimulant Mira had given me kept me alert despite my injuries, though each movement sent fresh waves of pain through my ribcage. By the time I reached the access point nearest the ceremonial hall, I was sweating profusely, and my hands had developed a slight tremor. I checked the time. 10 minutes until the meeting. I would need to cross a public concourse to reach the hall. Risky, but unavoidable. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted my jacket to conceal the weapons and emerged from the maintenance hatch into the bustling thoroughfare. The bazaar never slept. And even with the recent disturbance, commerce continued unabated. I kept my head down, moving with purpose but not hurry. The ceremonial hall loomed ahead, an ancient structure predating the bazaar itself, its weathered stone facade incongruous among the metallic and composite materials of the surrounding buildings. According to legend, it had once been a temple to forgotten gods, though now it served mainly as a neutral ground for negotiations between the three powers. I approached one of the side entrances, noting the distinct lack of security. Either Tharka had arranged for privacy, or I was walking into an ambush. Possibly both. The entrance led to a circular antechamber, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi growing in patterns across the ceiling. The air smelled of age and incense, with an undertone of ozone that suggested recent energy weapon discharge. "You're punctual. Good." The voice came from the shadows to my right. I turned, hand instinctively moving toward my concealed weapon, then froze. General Tharka emerged into the dim light, even more imposing up close than she had been in the marketplace. Without her ceremonial armor, the powerful musculature beneath her golden fur was more apparent. She wore only a simple harness adorned with military insignia and a utility belt from which hung several devices I couldn't identify. "Most prey species run when given the opportunity," she observed, circling me slowly. Her movement was fluid, predatory, but controlled. "I'm not prey," I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "No," she agreed. "You are not. That is why we are here." She stopped directly in front of me, amber eyes studying me with unsettling intensity. "You survived at the Ryol excavation site 8 Earth years ago. Outpost TK-421. Not a question, a statement." "You were there," I realized. "I commanded the recovery operation." Her nostrils flared slightly. "Your scent was on the artifact, mingled with blood and the stink of fear, but unmistakable." My mind raced. The classified mission, the ruins, the symbol. They were all connected to the Malaros. "What artifact?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "The Blood Covenant Stone, a genetic key created by our ancestors to identify compatible bloodlines across species." I remembered now. A stone tablet covered in spiral patterns, approximately the size of my forearm. My team had recovered it from the inner chamber just before the defense systems activated. "It chose you," Tharka continued. "When you touched it, it responded to your genetic pattern. The first non-Malaros it has ever recognized." "I don't understand. Why would it recognize human DNA?" Tharka's expression shifted, her features hardening. "That is what many would like to know, particularly those who believe in the purity of our bloodline." Understanding dawned. "The traditionalists you mentioned, they don't believe humans and Malaros should mix." "They believe more than that," she growled. "They believe our destiny is to rule, not to share power with the Zarn and Ryul. They see the Covenant's response to you as a threat to their vision of genetic supremacy." "And what do you believe?" Her amber eyes held mine. "I believe in survival. Our historians record that before the ancient wars, before the Three Powers Treaty, our people were more numerous, more diverse. The genetic purification that followed made us stronger in some ways, but vulnerable in others." "Genetic bottlenecking," I nodded. "It happens on Earth too. Species become too specialized, lose adaptive traits." "Precisely. For 10 generations, our fertility rates have declined. Warriors are born smaller, weaker. The traditionalists blame outside influence. But I have seen the genetic data." She stepped closer. "We are dying. Ryan Vale. Slowly, but certainly." Hearing my name on her lips was jarring. "How do you—" "I have resources." She dismissed the question. "What matters is that the Blood Covenant chose you. It recognized something in your genetic structure compatible with our warrior bloodline. So this public claim, this battlemate declaration. Political necessity. By claiming you through ancient rites, I have temporarily protected you from those who would dissect you to understand why the Covenant responded." "Temporarily," I noted. "Indeed. The traditionalists are already moving against us. They cannot accept what your compatibility represents." "Which is?" "The future. her voice lowered to a rumble. A potential path forward for our species through controlled genetic diversity, something they have fought against for centuries. I processed this information, the implications cascading through my mind. So I'm what? A breeding stud for the Malaros Empire? Tharka's lips pulled back, revealing impressive fangs. It took me a moment to recognize it as her version of a smile. Your species has a remarkable capacity for reducing complex concepts to their crudest form. She shook her head. The genetic bonding is symbolic, political. Though, she added, her eyes traveling over me with newfound interest. Not without its biological aspects. I felt heat rise to my face and changed the subject. The Zarn and Raoul, what's their interest in this? The Zarn wish to understand the genetic compatibility mechanism for their own purposes, creating perfect soldiers, most likely. The Raoul fear what they call the awakening of the ancient warblood. They believe it would disrupt their spiritual balance. And you brought me into this mess because the alternative was letting them take you apart molecule by molecule. Her expression hardened. And because I believe in following the wisdom of our ancestors. If the Covenant recognized you, there is purpose in it. A distant alarm sounded, and Tharka's ears flicked toward the noise. Our time grows short, she said. Security forces will sweep this sector soon. What happens now? Now, we complete the blood bond publicly. It will grant you certain protections under Malaros law. And if I refuse? Her amber eyes narrowed. Then I cannot protect you from what comes next. I weighed my options, which were admittedly limited. Return to Mira's hideout and hope to evade capture until I could escape the Bazaar? Unlikely. Try to fight my way out. Suicidal. This blood bond, I asked cautiously. What does it entail exactly? An exchange of genetic material through ritual combat, followed by public declaration of compatibility. When you say ritual combat, Tharka's fanged smile returned. Nothing so severe as our first encounter. A controlled demonstration of strength and will. And the genetic exchange? A simple blood ritual. Your species is squeamish about such things? Not squeamish, I corrected. Just cautious about exchanging bodily fluids with someone who threw me across a marketplace. A rumbling sound emerged from her chest. Laughter. I realized with surprise. You humans. So fragile, yet so defiant. She extended a clawed hand. Come. We have little time. I hesitated only briefly before taking her hand. Her palm was rough with calluses, her grip powerful but restrained. For what it's worth, I said as she led me toward the main chamber. I'm sorry about the smile. Cultural misunderstanding. Your smile is what saved you, she replied without looking back. Any other response would have resulted in your immediate execution. Comforting. The main ceremonial chamber was vast, its domed ceiling stretching at least 30 meters overhead. Ancient murals depicted epic battles and what appeared to be genetic engineering scenes, warriors being created or modified through mystical means. At the center stood a raised platform of polished stone, illuminated by shafts of artificial light designed to mimic a natural sun. On the platform rested a familiar object, the spiral-marked tablet I'd encountered years ago. The Blood Covenant, Tharka confirmed, following my gaze. Recovered from the ruins and brought here for the ceremony. How did you manage that? It was taken by Earth forces, and later stolen by Zarn researchers, then recovered by my team. She led me toward the platform. Its journey has been as complex as its purpose. We ascended the steps to the platform. Up close, the tablet was even more intricate than I remembered. The spiral patterns contained thousands of tiny symbols, forming a complex language, or perhaps a genetic code. What now? I asked. Now we complete what began 8 years ago. Tharka drew a ceremonial dagger from her belt. The blade glinted with an unusual metallic sheen. Your hand. I hesitated. The blade is sterile, she assured me, and the cut shallow. Reluctantly, I extended my right hand. With surprising gentleness, Tharka drew the blade across my palm, opening a thin line that immediately welled with blood. She repeated the process on her own massive palm, then clasped our hands together, mingling our blood. "Place your other hand on the covenant," she instructed. I complied, pressing my left palm against the cool surface of the stone tablet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, beneath my touch, the stone began to warm. The spiral patterns illuminated with a soft blue glow that spread outward from my hand. A tingling sensation shot up my arm, not painful, but intense, as though every nerve ending had suddenly awakened. The sensation spread through my body, centering in my chest and head. Images flashed through my mind. Ancient battlefields, stars seen from unfamiliar skies, creatures both recognizable and alien, knowledge without context, memories that weren't mine. Through our joined hands, I felt Tharka experiencing the same phenomenon. Her powerful body tensed, her breathing quickened. The blue glow intensified, enveloping us both in its radiance. The symbols on the tablet rearranged themselves, forming new patterns that somehow seemed more complete, more balanced. And then, as suddenly as it began, the glow faded. The tablet cooled beneath my hand, though the new pattern remained etched in its surface. "It is done," Tharka announced, her voice rough with emotion. "The blood bond is complete." I staggered slightly as she released my hand, a wave of dizziness washing over me. "What? What was that?" Before she could answer, the massive doors at the far end of the chamber burst open. A contingent of armored Malaros warriors stormed in, led by a heavily decorated male, whose gray-streaked mane marked him as older than Tharka. "Sacrilege!" he roared, pointing an accusatory claw at us. "The general has defiled our sacred covenant with alien blood." Tharka stepped forward, positioning herself between me and the newcomers. "Commander Valkis, your presence was not requested at this ceremony." "This is no ceremony," Valkis snarled. "This is treason against our bloodline." More warriors filed in behind him, at least 20 in total, all heavily armed. I noted with growing alarm that they wore different insignia than Tharka. They weren't her troops. "The Covenant has accepted him," Tharka stated firmly. "By our most ancient laws, the blood bond is legitimate." "The laws have been corrupted," Valkis countered. "As have you, General, consorting with lesser species, polluting our genetic future." He gestured to his warriors. "Seize them both, the human for dissection, the traitor for public execution." The warriors advanced, weapons raised. I reached for the neural disruptor concealed beneath my jacket, but Tharka's hand on my arm stopped me. "Not yet," she murmured. "Wait for my signal." Valkis approached the platform, his contempt evident in every movement. "I expected better from you, Tharka, a warrior of your lineage, betraying everything we stand for." "I betray nothing," she replied coldly. "I follow the guidance of our ancestors, as embodied in the covenant." "A relic," he dismissed. "A remnant of weaker times, before we purified our bloodline. Before we began our slow extinction, you mean?" Tharka's voice carried throughout the chamber. "Our numbers dwindle with each generation. Valkis, our young grow weaker. How many cubs in your own pride reached maturity last cycle? Half? Less?" Valkis's expression darkened. "Temporary setbacks. The purity movement will restore our strength." "It will destroy us," Tharka roared, her patience finally breaking. "Genetic diversity is our only hope for survival, as the ancestors knew when they created the covenant." "Enough," Valkis signaled his warriors. "Take them." The armed Malaros surged forward. Tharka tensed beside me, and I recognized her subtle shift in posture. The signal. I drew the neural disruptor and fired in one fluid motion, dropping the two nearest warriors. Beside me, Tharka moved with incredible speed, leaping from the platform to engage 3 attackers simultaneously. What followed was chaos. I maintained my position on the platform, using the elevated position for cover, while picking off warriors with precise shots. The neural disruptor wouldn't kill them, but the convulsive paralysis it induced would keep them out of the fight. Tharka was magnificent in battle, a blur of golden fur and lethal precision. She fought without weapons, relying on her natural strength and what appeared to be centuries of combat training. Warriors, twice my size, went flying as she struck them, reminding me vividly of my own brief flight through the market. Valkis himself withdrew to the back of the chamber, shouting orders as his forces were systematically dismantled by the combination of Tharka's raw power and my targeted fire. When half his warriors lay incapacitated, he finally drew his own weapon, a heavy energy rifle that hummed ominously as it charged. "Tharka!" I shouted in warning, aiming my disruptor at Valkis. Too late. He fired, the energy blast catching Tharka mid-leap. She crashed to the ground, her fur singed, body convulsing from the energy discharge. Rage surged through me. Unexpected. Primal. I abandoned the neural disruptor for the heavier rifle Mira had provided, taking aim at Valkis. Something strange happened as I sighted down the barrel. A clarity of purpose I'd never experienced before, coupled with a certainty of action that seemed to bypass conscious thought. My perception of time slowed, and I could see the minute adjustments needed in my aim to compensate for distance and movement. I fired. The shot struck Valkis's weapon with impossible precision, shattering its energy core. The resulting feedback sent him staggering backward, the ruined rifle dropping from his hands. The remaining warriors hesitated, looking to their commander for direction. I used their moment of uncertainty to leap from the platform, sliding to Tharka's side. "Can you move?" I asked urgently, keeping the rifle trained on the nearest warriors. She growled in response, forcing herself to her feet despite the obvious pain. "The bond. It's affecting you already." "What do you mean?" "Battle instinct. Enhanced perception." She straightened to her full height, facing the remaining warriors. "The genetic exchange works both ways. Human." Before I could process this information, a new commotion erupted at the chamber entrance. A mixed force of Zarn researchers and Ryul adepts poured in, their leaders shouting contradictory demands. "Secure the Covenant artifact. Contain the bloodline carriers. Neutralize the genetic anomaly." The situation deteriorated rapidly as the three factions converged on the platform. Zarn forces engaged with Valkis's remaining warriors, while Ryul adepts attempted to approach the Covenant tablet, only to be repelled by both groups. "We need to leave," I urged Tharka, supporting her massive frame as best I could. "Is there another exit?" She nodded toward a small doorway partially hidden behind a column. "Ceremonial passage. Leads to the lower levels." We made our way toward it, using the three-way conflict as cover. I fired occasionally to clear our path, noting with alarm that my rifle's charge indicator was dropping rapidly. Just as we reached the hidden door, a familiar voice called out from behind a nearby pillar. "Took you long enough?" Mira emerged from the shadows, a compact energy weapon in each hand. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost in the religious experience." "What are you doing here?" I demanded, even as relief flooded through me. "Saving your genetically interesting hide, apparently." She nodded toward the exit. "I've secured a path to the maintenance tunnels. We need to move before they stop shooting each other, and remember, you're the main prize." With Tharka leaning heavily on my shoulder, we followed Mira through the narrow passage. Behind us, the sounds of combat continued, punctuated by energy discharges and the distinctive roar of Malaros warriors. "The Covenant," Tharka protested weakly. "We cannot leave it." "Already handled," Mira replied cryptically, tapping one of the data crystals in her hair. "Now focus on walking. You're rather heavy for a sprint." The passage opened into a utility corridor, similar to the ones I'd navigated earlier. Mira led us through a series of turns that I tried and failed to memorize, eventually arriving at what appeared to be a service elevator. "This will take us to the lower market," she explained, activating the controls. "I have transport waiting." "Transport to where?" I asked as the elevator began its descent. "Somewhere not here," she replied unhelpfully. "Specifics can wait until we're not being hunted by three of the most powerful factions in the galaxy." Tharka had regained some of her strength, now standing without support, though still favoring her right side. The human asks a valid question. "Your motives remain unclear." Information broker. Mira's black eyes revealed nothing. "My motives are survival, same as yours. And right now, that means getting both of you somewhere safe until we understand what's happening with your genetic situation." The elevator stopped with a gentle lurch. Mira checked a small scanner before opening the doors, confirming the area was clear. We emerged into a dimly lit storage area filled with shipping containers. The distant hum of the market was audible, but this section appeared deserted. "This way," Mira directed, leading us toward a loading bay where a nondescript cargo skiff waited. "It's not luxury transportation, but it's untraceable." As we approached the vehicle, a sharp pain lanced through my skull. I stumbled, nearly falling as images flooded my mind. Battle formations, weapon schematics, tactical assessments in a language I shouldn't understand. "It's accelerating," Tharka observed, steadying me with a massive hand. "The genetic memory transfer—" "What's happening to him?" Mira demanded, her cool demeanor cracking slightly. "The blood bond doesn't just connect genetic material," Tharka explained. "It shares ancestral memory, combat instincts. Normally, the process takes weeks of gradual integration, but the Covenant accelerated it." Another wave of foreign thoughts crashed through my consciousness. I saw ancient battlefields through eyes, not my own. Felt the weight of responsibility for an entire species' survival. "Make it stop," I gasped. "I cannot," Tharka replied, genuine regret in her voice. "Once begun, the process must complete." Mira cursed in several languages. "Get him on the skiff. We need to reach the sanctuary before he loses consciousness." They half-carried me to the vehicle, my legs barely functional, as my brain struggled to integrate the flood of alien memories. The last thing I remembered before darkness claimed me was Tharka's amber eyes, watching me with a mixture of concern and fascination. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a comfortable surface, in a room bathed in soft, amber light. The ceiling above me was adorned with what appeared to be a star map, not of Earth's sky, but one I somehow recognized as the view from ancient Malaros. "The memory integration has stabilized," a deep voice observed. Tharka, though I couldn't see her from my position. "His vital signs are returning to normal." "That was not normal," Mira's voice replied sharply. "Humans aren't designed to accommodate Malaros' genetic memory. You nearly killed him." "It was not my intention." Tharka sounded genuinely remorseful. "The Covenant should have regulated the transfer." "Well, it didn't." I heard Mira move closer. "And now we have a bigger problem. The Zarn have declared the bond a violation of the Three Powers Treaty. The Ryol Sanctum has issued a spiritual quarantine order, and Commander Valkus is claiming you've committed treason by activating the war bloodline in an alien species." I forced myself to sit up, fighting a wave of dizziness. The room came into focus, a spacious chamber with ancient-looking technology integrated with modern systems. Mira stood near what appeared to be a medical console, while Tharka occupied a reinforced chair designed for her larger frame. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "My sanctuary," Mira replied. "Technically outside Bazaar jurisdiction, though that won't stop them for long." I rubbed my temples, trying to sort through the jumble of memories now, sharing space with my own. What happened at the ceremonial hall after we left? "Three-way standoff," Mira reported. "The Zarn secured the Covenant artifact. The Ryul attempted a spiritual cleansing of the area, and Valkus's forces retreated to regroup. And now all three want us," I concluded. "Dead or alive, depending on the faction." Mira activated a holographic display, showing news feeds from around the bazaar. Each depicted some version of the confrontation at the ceremonial hall, though the details varied widely, depending on the source. One particular image caught my attention: Tharka and me on the platform, surrounded by the blue glow of the activated covenant. The image had a mythic quality to it, like something from an ancient religious text rather than recent events. "They're calling it the awakening," Tharka explained, noting my interest. "The fulfillment of an old prophecy about the return of the warrior bloodline." "I don't feel very prophetic," I muttered. "Just confused and with a splitting headache." "The memories will settle," she assured me. "Your mind is still organizing the genetic information." I focused on her, noticing subtle changes in her demeanor. She seemed less intimidating now, more familiar, as though I'd known her for years rather than hours. "You're experiencing it too," I realized. "My memories." She nodded slowly. "Human perspective is disorienting. So many emotions, so much internal conflict. How do you function with such chaos in your minds?" "We manage." I swung my legs over the side of the bed, testing my stability. "So what happens now? We can't exactly hide forever." Mira exchanged a glance with Tharka before responding. "There's something you should see first." She adjusted the holographic display to show what appeared to be genetic data, complex spirals of information highlighted in various colors. "This is your genetic structure," she explained, pointing to one strand. "And this is Tharka's." She indicated another. "This is what happened when the covenant activated." The two strands were shown merging, not in a chaotic jumble, but in a perfectly complementary pattern. Certain sequences highlighted themselves, showing precise alignment. "That shouldn't be possible," I said, though I now possessed enough of Tharka's knowledge to understand the significance. "Human and Malaros DNA aren't compatible." "They shouldn't be," Mira agreed, "unless they were designed to be." Tharka rose from her chair, approaching the display. "The ancient texts speak of a time before the Great Purification, when our ancestors traveled among the stars, seeding compatible life forms on distant worlds." "You're suggesting humans are descended from Malaros genetic engineering?" I asked incredulously. "Not descended," Mira corrected. "Parallel evolution, guided by the same template. The Covenant recognized the pattern it was programmed to find: genetic compatibility designed by the same ancient scientists." The implications were staggering. "So the bond is awakening genetic potential that has lain dormant in both species for millennia," Tharka finished. "Potential deliberately engineered for eventual recombination." My head swam with the concept. Why? What purpose would that serve? "Survival," Tharka replied simply. "Our ancestors foresaw the genetic bottleneck that would result from isolation. They created compatible bloodlines on multiple worlds as insurance against extinction. And the Covenant is the key to activating those compatibilities," I concluded, pieces falling into place. "That's why everyone wants it so badly." "Precisely," Mira confirmed. "The Zarn see it as a weapon of genetic manipulation. The Ryul fear it will upset their spiritual hierarchy, and the Malaros traditionalists see it as proof that their genetic purity ideology is false," Tharka growled. "Which is why Valkus and his followers will stop at nothing to destroy both it and us." A new alert flashed on Mira's console. She checked it, her expression darkening. "Bazaar security forces are mobilizing. They've declared a state of emergency and imposed travel restrictions. They're locking down the entire bazaar to find us." I realized, not just us. Mira expanded the alert to show more details. "Valkus has staged a coup within the Malaros military hierarchy. He's declared Tharka a traitor and assumed command of all Malaros forces in the sector." Tharka's massive hands clenched into fists. "He will use this to justify an attack on the Zarn. He has always believed we should rule alone, not share power with the other factions. And with the Covenant in Zarn hands, I began. He has his pretext for war, Mira finished grimly. The situation had escalated beyond a simple cultural misunderstanding or even a genetic curiosity. We were now at the center of a potential interstellar conflict that could engulf the entire sector. We need to get the Covenant back, I decided, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Tharka regarded me with newfound respect. The battle instinct speaks through you already. Not just instinct, I countered. Logic. The Covenant is the only proof of what's really happening, that we were meant to be compatible. Without it, Valkis's narrative goes unchallenged. Mira looked skeptical. And how exactly do you propose we retrieve an ancient artifact from the most secure Zarn research facility in the Bazaar? I felt a smile spread across my face, one that probably resembled Tharka's predatory grin more than my usual expression. The same way humans have survived against overwhelming odds for centuries, I replied. Improvisation, misdirection, and a healthy disregard for the impossible. Tharka's rumbling laugh filled the room. Perhaps there is wisdom in the ancestors' design after all. Mira sighed deeply. I was afraid you'd say something like that. She activated another console. In that case, we're going to need a better plan than healthy disregard for the impossible. Over the next hour, we formulated a strategy. Mira's sanctuary contained an impressive collection of intelligence on the Bazaar's security systems, including the Zarn research facility, where the Covenant was likely being held. Tharka provided military insight, her tactical knowledge now augmented by my own experience in special forces operations. The blending of our approaches, her direct power with my adaptability, created a comprehensive plan that neither of us could have devised alone. The facility has 3 layers of security, Mira explained, displaying the schematics. Biometric scanners, neural pattern recognition, and adaptive defense drones. Getting past anyone would be challenging. All 3 is virtually impossible. Nothing's impossible, I countered. Just improbable. And we have advantages they won't expect. Such as? Mira raised an eyebrow. I glanced at Tharka. They'll be looking for a human and a Malaros. But with the blood bond, I'm technically neither fully human nor Malaros anymore. The scanners might not recognize your hybrid neural patterns. Tharka nodded in understanding. Exactly. And if we can create a diversion, something big enough to draw attention away from the facility, I might be able to help with that, Mira offered, a mischievous glint in her black eyes. The Ryul aren't the only ones who can create a spiritual disturbance. Our planning was interrupted by a proximity alert. Mira checked the security feed, then relaxed slightly. One of my contacts, she explained, with information we requested. She left briefly, returning with a data crystal, which she inserted into her console. A detailed map of the Bazaar's emergency protocols appeared. As suspected, they've implemented containment procedures, she reported. All docking bays sealed, identity verification at sector checkpoints, and energy signature scanning for Covenant-related frequencies. Can we use that? I asked, studying the protocols. The energy signature scanning? Mira caught on immediately. Create a false positive to draw resources away from the real Covenant. She nodded appreciatively. It could work. We'll need something that can mimic the Covenant's activation energy, Tharka noted. Like this? Mira held up a small device extracted from one of her hair ornaments. Data crystal containing a full, spectral recording of the Covenant activation. I stared at her. You recorded the ceremony? She shrugged. Information broker, remember? I record everything interesting. Remind me never to get on your bad side, I muttered. With this new asset, our plan took final shape. Mira would create multiple energy signature decoys across the Bazaar, triggering security responses and thinning their resources. Meanwhile, Tharka and I would infiltrate the Zarn facility during the confusion. One more thing, Mira added, producing a small injector. This will temporarily mask your genetic signature, making you read as fully human on their scanners. It won't last long, 3 hours at most. But it should be enough to get you through the outer security layers. I accepted the injector, noting Tharka's disapproving expression. You disagree? I asked her. Suppressing the bond, even temporarily, carries risks, she explained. The genetic integration is still stabilizing. What kind of risks? She hesitated. Disorientation, possible memory fragmentation, in extreme cases, neural shock. So, worst case, my brain melts, I summarized, versus being captured and dissected. I'll take my chances with the injection. Tharka growled her disapproval, but didn't argue further. As we made final preparations, I found myself studying Tharka with newfound understanding. Through the genetic memories, I now knew aspects of her life that she had never shared. Her childhood in the warrior creches of Malaros Prime. Her rise through the military ranks despite opposition to a female commander. Her secret doubts about the genetic purity doctrines she was sworn to uphold. You've been fighting this battle long before you met me, I observed quietly. She met my gaze, acknowledging that I now shared her memories. Yes, for years. I have seen the signs of our decline. Smaller litters, weaker cubs, increasing genetic disorders. But tradition is a powerful force among my people. So you've been looking for a solution, a way to introduce genetic diversity without triggering civil war. And then I found you at the excavation site, she confirmed. Or rather, the Covenant found you. I've been tracking your movements ever since, waiting for the right moment. The marketplace, I realized. That wasn't coincidence. I needed a public demonstration of compatibility that not even the traditionalists could deny. Her amber eyes held a hint of apology. Though I had not intended quite so dramatic an introduction. Throwing me across the market was a bit excessive, I agreed. But effective. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. You surprised me by surviving with such resilience. Few would have maintained consciousness after such treatment, let alone smiled. I've been told I'm stubborn that way. The moment of understanding between us was interrupted by Mira's return. She carried what appeared to be modified Zarn research uniforms. Your disguises, she announced. The genetic suppressant will handle your internal signature, but we still need to address the obvious visual differences. I examined the uniform. A standard Zarn researcher jumpsuit modified to accommodate my human proportions, complete with identification badges that Mira assured us would pass cursory inspection. Tharka's disguise was more complex, involving partial exoskeletal components that would alter her silhouette to approximate a larger Zarn security model. It won't hold up to close scrutiny, Mira warned. But in the confusion of multiple security alerts, it should get you through the checkpoint. We changed into our disguises, a process made awkward by the confined space and Tharka's massive frame. I administered the genetic suppressant, grimacing at the burning sensation as it entered my bloodstream. Almost immediately, I felt a distancing effect. The Malaros memories that had been integrating with my own receded, becoming more distant, less immediate. It was like watching a vivid dream fade upon waking. How do you feel? Tharka asked, concern evident in her voice. Like I'm losing something important, I admitted. But functional. She nodded in understanding. The bond remains, even if suppressed. Trust your instincts. They will guide you even without conscious access to the memories. With our disguises complete and the plan finalized, we prepared to leave Mira's sanctuary. She would trigger the decoy signals remotely, then meet us at a predetermined extraction point after we secured the Covenant. Remember, Mira cautioned as we reached the exit. The Bazaar will be in chaos. Security forces, 3 competing factions, and civilian panic. Stay focused on the objective and maintain communication through the secure channel. She handed each of us a small communicator designed to bypass standard signal jammers. And try not to get killed. Extracting corpses is considerably more difficult than extracting living assets. Your concern is touching, I replied dryly. It's practical, she corrected. Dead clients don't pay. With that encouraging send-off, we entered the access tunnel that would lead us back to the bazaar proper. The genetic suppressant had fully taken effect, leaving me feeling strangely hollow, as though a part of myself had been temporarily excised. Beside me, Tharka moved with characteristic precision, though her movements seemed slightly constrained by the disguise. We proceeded in silence, each lost in our own thoughts as we prepared to execute a plan that would either prevent an interstellar war or accelerate it. As we approached the bazaar entrance, Mira's voice came through our communicators. Decoy signals activating in 3, 2, 1. On cue, distant alarms began to sound. Emergency lights flashed along the corridor, and automated announcements in multiple languages instructed civilians to proceed to designated safety areas. That's our signal, I murmured to Tharka. Ready? She gave a barely perceptible nod, her amber eyes now hidden behind the polarized visor of her disguise. We emerged into the chaos of the bazaar's main level, where security forces rushed in multiple directions, responding to the Phantom Covenant signals Mira had activated. Civilians hurried toward shelter areas, creating a cover of movement that helped mask our progress. Following our memorized route, we made our way toward the Zarn Research District. Twice we were stopped at checkpoints, but the combination of our disguises, the general confusion, and the forged credentials Mira had provided allowed us through with minimal scrutiny. As we neared the research facility, the crowd thinned, replaced by increasing numbers of Zarn security drones and uniformed personnel. Here, our disguises would face more rigorous inspection. Identification, demanded a Zarn security officer at the district perimeter. Unlike the checkpoint guards, he studied our credentials with careful attention. I felt sweat forming beneath my uniform as his enhanced optical implants scanned the forged documents. Beside me, Tharka remained perfectly still, her training allowing her to project a calm I certainly didn't feel. After what seemed an eternity, the officer returned our credentials. Proceed to evacuation point Delta. All non-essential research personnel are being relocated due to the security alert. We acknowledged the order and moved past him, continuing toward the facility that, according to Mira's intelligence, housed the Covenant. That was too easy, I murmured once we were out of earshot. Agreed, Tharka replied tersely. Stay alert. The research facility loomed ahead, a sleek structure of metal and composite materials, its surface embedded with sensor arrays and defensive systems. Under normal circumstances, infiltrating such a building would be nearly impossible. But with multiple security alerts drawing resources elsewhere, the facility operated with reduced personnel. We approached the staff entrance, where a biometric scanner controlled access. This was the first real test of Mira's genetic suppressant. If it failed, alarms would trigger immediately. I placed my palm on the scanner, forcing myself to breathe normally as it analyzed my genetic pattern. The display flashed amber, then green. Access granted. Tharka followed suit, her disguised hand covering the scanner. Another moment of tension. Another green light. Inside, the facility was clinically sterile, with white corridors and laboratories visible through transparent walls. Researchers moved purposefully despite the external chaos, focused on their work with typical Zarn single-mindedness. We proceeded to the central laboratory complex where, according to the schematics Mira had provided, the Covenant would most likely be held. As we walked, I felt a growing discomfort, a pressure building behind my eyes, a slight disorientation in my movements. The suppressant is affecting you, Tharka observed quietly. I'm fine, I insisted, though the corridor seemed to waver slightly in my vision. The bond is fighting the suppression, she continued. Your body recognizes the foreign agent and is attempting to neutralize it. Great timing, I muttered. How long until it fails completely? Difficult to predict. The bond is stronger than anticipated. We reached the central laboratory complex, where a final security checkpoint awaited. neural pattern recognition scanners designed to detect unauthorized thought patterns or intentions. This was the most dangerous part of our infiltration. No disguise could fool a direct neural scan, and the genetic suppressant wasn't designed to mask thought patterns. "We need a distraction," I whispered, noting the two Zarn technicians monitoring the neural scanner. As if in response to my statement, a massive explosion rocked the facility. Warning lights flashed, and emergency containment protocols activated automatically. "Alert! Security breach in Sectors 7 through 9," announced an automated system. "All personnel implement emergency protocol Zarn Delta 3. The technicians abandoned their posts, rushing toward the source of the disturbance. We seized the opportunity, bypassing the neural scanner and entering the central laboratory. That wasn't one of Mira's decoys, I noted, as we moved swiftly through the suddenly empty lab. "No," Tharka agreed grimly. "That was military-grade explosives, Valkus. He's making his move against the Zarn, which means we have less time than anticipated." The central laboratory contained dozens of research stations, each dedicated to a different project. We moved through them methodically, searching for the Covenant. My disorientation was growing worse, the suppressant clearly losing its effectiveness. Flashes of Malaros memory began breaking through. Battle tactics, genetic engineering principles, ancient star maps, distracting me from our search. "There," Tharka pointed to a sealed containment unit at the far end of the lab. Inside, the familiar spiral-marked tablet rested on a scanning platform, surrounded by energy fields and monitoring equipment. We approached cautiously. The containment unit would have its own security systems, independent from the facility's main grid. "Can you bypass it?" Tharka asked. I studied the control panel, leveraging both my engineering background and the fragments of Zarn knowledge now filtering through my consciousness. "Yes, but it will trigger secondary alarms," I replied. "We'll have minutes at most before security responds. Then be quick." I began the bypass sequence, fingers moving with growing certainty as more Malaros genetic memory broke through the failing suppressant. The containment field wavered, then deactivated completely. Tharka reached in and retrieved the Covenant tablet, its surface cool and inert under her touch. "We need to activate it," she said, her voice taking on a ritual cadence. "Complete the connection that was interrupted." "Here, now." I glanced nervously at the laboratory entrance. "We should get it to safety first." "There is no safety," she countered. "Not for us. Not for the Bazaar. Not for any of the three powers if Valkus succeeds in starting this war. The Covenant must be awakened fully to reveal the truth of our connected heritage." Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors. "The choice is yours, Ryan Vale," Tharka said solemnly, holding the tablet between us. "Complete the bond or retreat. Both paths carry risk." I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand beside hers on the ancient stone. "Let's finish what we started." The moment our hands touched the Covenant together, the genetic suppressant in my system shattered like glass. Malaros memories flooded back with overwhelming force, no longer separate from my own, but fully integrated. I gasped at the sensation, feeling Tharka's consciousness brushing against mine across a bridge of shared genetic code. The tablet responded immediately, illuminating with the now familiar blue glow. But this time, the light didn't remain contained within the stone. It expanded outward, enveloping us both in a sphere of radiance that spread to fill the laboratory. Within that light, knowledge unfolded. Not just Malaros battle tactics or human survival techniques, but something far older and more profound. The true purpose of the Covenant revealed itself not in words, but in understanding that flowed directly into our minds. The ancient Malaros, facing extinction from a genetic plague, had created the Covenant as more than a compatibility key. It was a repository of their entire genetic library, a blueprint for species regeneration through controlled diversity. They had seeded compatible genetic patterns across dozens of worlds, Earth among them, creating the potential for future recombination. Humans weren't descended from Malaros, nor were we engineered by them. Rather, we had been guided along parallel evolutionary paths, developing complementary genetic structures that, when recombined, would strengthen both species. The blue light intensified, then pulsed outward in a wave that passed through the laboratory walls. I sensed it expanding throughout the bazaar, carrying with it the truth of our shared heritage. As suddenly as it began, the activation ended. The tablet cooled in our hands, its purpose fulfilled. What just happened? I asked, struggling to process the experience. The Covenant has awakened fully, Tharka replied, her voice filled with wonder. It has shared its knowledge with all who can receive it. All who can receive it? Those with the genetic receptors, primarily Malaros, but also compatible species. She looked at me meaningfully. Humans. The implications were staggering. So now, every Malaros in the Bazaar knows the truth of our origins, the purpose of our creation, the path to our survival. Before I could respond, the laboratory door burst open. A squad of Malaros warriors stormed in, led by none other than Commander Valkis himself. "Traitors!" he roared, energy weapon raised. "You have defiled our heritage for the last time." Tharka stepped forward, placing herself between me and the weapons. "It is you who betrays our heritage, Valkis. The Covenant has spoken. Our ancestors created us for diversity, not purity." "Lies!" He aimed his weapon at her chest. "The human has corrupted you, corrupted our sacred relic. The punishment is death." I moved to Tharka's side, no longer willing to let her face this alone. The Covenant didn't just speak to us, Commander. It broadcasted its message to every genetically compatible being in the Bazaar. Uncertainty flickered across Valkis's features as several of his warriors exchanged glances. "Ask your warriors," I continued. "Ask them what they felt when the blue wave passed through them. Ask them what knowledge now sits in their minds alongside their own memories." One of the warriors lowered his weapon slightly. "Commander, I saw it. The ancestors. Their purpose for us." "Silence!" Valkis ordered, but his authority was visibly weakening as more warriors showed signs of hesitation. "You feel it too, Valkis," Tharka pressed. "The truth you've denied. Our species is dying from the very purity you worship. The ancestors foresaw this and prepared a path for our renewal. Through contamination with lesser species," he snarled, though with less conviction than before. "Through reunion with compatible genetic lines," I corrected. "Lines specifically designed to complement our own." The standoff might have continued indefinitely, if not for the arrival of new figures in the doorway. Zarn researchers and Ryul adepts, drawn by the Covenant's activation. "The prophecy is fulfilled," announced one of the Ryul, his voice carrying the weight of spiritual authority. "The Covenant has awakened the blood memory in all compatible beings." "Our sensors detected a massive information transfer," added a Zarn researcher, her cybernetic implants still processing data. "Genetic codices, historical records, technological schematics, all transmitted through some form of quantum entanglement we cannot yet explain." Valkis looked from the newcomers to his increasingly uncertain warriors, then back to Tharka and me. His weapon remained raised, but his resolve was visibly wavering. "Choose wisely, Commander," Tharka advised. "Continue this path of destruction, or help lead our people toward the future the ancestors prepared for us." For a moment, I thought he might still choose violence. Then, with a growl of frustration, he lowered his weapon. "This is not over," he warned. "The Council will decide the truth of these revelations." "As they should," Tharka agreed. "With all information now available to them, thanks to the Covenant." With that concession, the immediate threat of violence receded. The Zarn researchers approached the Covenant tablet with undisguised fascination, while the Ryul adepts began what appeared to be a blessing ceremony over the assembled group. In the midst of this unlikely gathering, my communicator buzzed. Mira's voice came through, tense but controlled. "If you've finished changing the course of galactic history, perhaps you'd like to know that Bazaar security forces are converging on your location. I suggest a hasty exit." I glanced at Tharka, who had clearly received the same message. She nodded toward a service door at the rear of the laboratory. "We should leave while the factions are still processing what's happened," she murmured. "Political stability will take time to establish." We slipped away as the Zarn, Ryul, and Malaros began tentative discussions about the implications of the Covenant's revelation. Commander Valkus was too engaged in defending his position to notice our departure. The service corridor led to a maintenance shaft similar to the ones we'd navigated earlier. Mira provided directions through our communicators, guiding us through the maze of tunnels toward an extraction point. "The Bazaar is in an uproar," she reported. "News of the Covenant's activation is spreading faster than the authorities can contain it. The Three Powers representatives have called an emergency council meeting." "Are we invited?" I asked dryly. "You're the main topic of discussion," she replied. "Though I'd recommend against attending in person until the political temperature cools." We emerged from the tunnels into a small docking bay where a sleek, unmarked vessel waited. Mira stood at the entry ramp, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, but triumphant. "Interesting day at the office?" she greeted us. "You could say that." I glanced back at the access tunnel. "No pursuit?" "They're too busy arguing about what just happened to organize an effective chase." She gestured us aboard. "But that won't last. We should depart while we can." The ship's interior was surprisingly spacious, outfitted with both human and Malaros accommodations. I raised an eyebrow at Mira, who shrugged. "I prepare for contingencies," she explained. "And this particular contingency has been in motion since Tharka first identified you at the excavation site." I turned to Tharka, who had removed her disguise and now stood at her full, impressive height. "You've been planning this for 8 years?" "Not this specifically," she admitted. "But I knew the Covenant had chosen you for a reason. I've been monitoring your movements, waiting for the right moment to make contact." "By throwing me across a marketplace," I reminded her. Her amber eyes gleamed with amusement. "An effective introduction, as you yourself acknowledged." As the ship lifted off, Mira brought up a holographic display of the Bazaar. Multiple security vessels were visible, but none moved to intercept us. "They're confused about whether we're criminals or saviors," she explained. "It will take time for a unified response to form." "If one forms at all," Tharka added. "The Covenant's revelation challenges the foundation of the Three Powers Agreement. The political landscape will never be the same." I sank into a seat designed for human proportions, feeling the weight of the day's events. The bond between Tharka and me had stabilized, our genetic memories now fully integrated. I could access her knowledge as easily as my own, though the experience remained distinctly foreign. "What happens now?" I asked, directing the question to both of them. Mira piloted the ship away from the Bazaar, setting a course for open space. "Now we find somewhere safe to wait out the initial chaos. I have a facility on one of Velthera's moons where we can monitor developments." "And after that?" I pressed. Tharka settled into a reinforced chair across from me. "That depends on how the Three Powers respond to the Covenant's message. If they accept the truth of our shared heritage, a new era of genetic research and cooperation could begin. And if they don't, then we become the nucleus of a new movement," she replied simply. "The first of many blood-bonded pairs who will carry forward the ancestors' vision." The implication hung in the air between us, that we were now irrevocably linked, pioneers of a genetic reunification centuries in the making. "I just wanted to buy parts for my ship," I mused, shaking my head at the absurdity of it all. Mira laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm. "The universe rarely cares about our modest plans, Spacer." As we accelerated away from the bazaar, I watched the massive structure recede through the view screen. Just days ago, it had been nothing more than another trading post on my journey. Now it was the birthplace of a potential galactic revolution. "You know," I said to Tharka, "on Earth, we have a tradition of dinner and conversation before genetic bonding ceremonies." Her fanged smile appeared. "And on Malaros, we have a tradition of testing a potential mate's strength before accepting them. Consider yourself fortunate. I only threw you across one market." Mira groaned from the pilot seat. "If you two are going to engage in cross-species flirtation, please wait until I've finished plotting our escape trajectory." 3 days later, we sat in Mira's lunar facility, monitoring the ongoing developments at the Bazaar. The political situation had evolved rapidly, with factions forming not along traditional species lines, but according to their response to the Covenant's revelation. A coalition of progressive Malaros, led by Tharka's supporters, had joined with curious Zarn researchers and spiritually aligned Ryul to form what they called the Covenant Accord, a group dedicated to exploring the implications of our shared genetic heritage. Opposing them were the traditionalists of all three species, those who rejected the Covenant's message as heresy, contamination, or spiritual pollution. Though outnumbered, they were vocal and occasionally violent in their resistance. "The Council has requested your presence," Mira announced, reading from a secure communication channel. "Both of you. They want to examine the blood bond directly." Tharka and I exchanged glances, our connection allowing a wordless exchange of concerns and considerations. "A trap?" I suggested. "Possibly," she acknowledged. "Or genuine scientific and spiritual curiosity." Mira studied us with her impenetrable black eyes. "The message comes with assurances of safe passage and neutral observation. It's signed by representatives of all three powers, including some who previously wanted you dead." "People change," I observed, "especially when confronted with evidence that contradicts their entire worldview." "Some people," Tharka corrected. "Others entrench themselves deeper in denial." The decision wasn't easy, but after lengthy discussion, we agreed to return to the Bazaar under specific conditions: armed escort, neutral meeting ground, and Mira's continued involvement as an independent witness. The Council accepted our terms, and 2 days later, we found ourselves back where this strange journey had begun, though this time, we arrived openly, aboard a diplomatic vessel rather than sneaking through service tunnels. The Bazaar had changed in our absence. Banners displaying the spiral symbol of the Covenant hung alongside the traditional emblems of the three powers. Mixed-species security teams patrolled the thoroughfares, a visible symbol of the new cooperation. We were escorted to the ceremonial hall, now restored from the damage of our previous visit. Inside, representatives of all three powers waited, along with scientific and spiritual advisors. Commander Valkus was notably absent, having reportedly retreated to Malaro space with his most devoted followers. The meeting that followed was part scientific examination, part spiritual ceremony, and part political negotiation. Tharka and I submitted to non-invasive scans that confirmed what we already knew. Our genetic structures had harmonized in ways that should have been impossible according to conventional understanding. "The implications are profound," stated the chief Zarn researcher, her cybernetic implants processing the data in real time. "If compatible genetic structures exist across multiple species, our entire approach to evolutionary biology must be reconsidered." "The spiritual texts have always spoken of connection between all living beings," added a Ryul adept, "but never did we imagine it could be so literally manifested." The Malaros representative, a female older than Tharka, with battle scars crisscrossing her golden fur, studied us with particular intensity. "Our population decline has accelerated in recent generations," she finally acknowledged. "If the Covenant offers a path to renewal through controlled genetic diversity, the High Pride would be remiss to dismiss it without thorough investigation." It wasn't unconditional acceptance. But it was a beginning, an opening for dialogue where before there had been only rigid tradition and suspicion. As the formal proceedings concluded, Tharka and I found ourselves with a new status, neither prisoners nor fugitives, but something unprecedented. Genetic ambassadors, the Council called us, though the term felt inadequate for the reality of our bond. They fear you, Mira observed later, as we gathered in private quarters assigned to us. Not as enemies, but as harbingers of change they cannot control. Fear often precedes adaptation. Tharka replied philosophically. My people feared the stars before we learned to travel among them. I paced the room, still processing the day's events. So what now? We become scientific specimens, political symbols? We become whatever we choose, Tharka said simply. The bond gives us certain obligations, yes, but also freedom no single species individual can claim. Mira raised an eyebrow. Planning to start your own faction? Planning to finish what the ancestors began, Tharka corrected. The Covenant wasn't activated merely to prove a point about our shared heritage. It was activated to initiate a process of renewal, for both our species and eventually others with compatible structures. The weight of that purpose settled over me. When I'd entered the Bazaar of Beasts just days ago, I'd been a solitary ship engineer with modest ambitions. Now I was half of something unprecedented, carrying the genetic legacy of an ancient civilization. You know, I said to Tharka, most relationships start with smaller commitments. Dinner, movies, maybe a weekend trip. Not galactic genetic revolution. Her rumbling laugh filled the room. Humans and their incremental approach to destiny. Mira rolled her eyes at both of us. If you're going to rewrite the genetic future of multiple species, at least try not to be nauseating about it. In the months that followed, the three powers adjusted to the new reality introduced by the Covenant's activation. Research teams, mixed species by necessity, studied the genetic compatibility patterns revealed by our bond. Spiritual leaders incorporated the new understanding into their teachings, with varying degrees of acceptance. And Tharka and I traveled between worlds, meeting others who showed signs of genetic compatibility, helping them understand the potential that lay dormant in their DNA. Commander Valkus and his traditionalist followers eventually established a separatist colony dedicated to genetic purity, though reports suggested their numbers dwindled with each generation, exactly as the Covenant had predicted. Mira continued her work as an information broker, though now with unprecedented access to all three powers and a special interest in genetic data. She claimed to be motivated purely by profit, but I sometimes caught her watching our work with something that looked suspiciously like pride. As for the personal aspects of our bond, the parts not detailed in scientific reports or spiritual texts, Tharka and I found our way forward with the same combination of adaptation and stubbornness that had brought us together in the first place. Human emotional needs and Malaro's territorial instincts made for interesting compromises. But the genetic bond gave us insights into each other that no normal relationship could match. 1 year after our first explosive meeting in the marketplace, we stood together on the observation deck of a Malaros diplomatic vessel, watching the stars of a system where potential compatible species had been identified. Nervous? Tharka asked, sensing my elevated heart rate through our bond. Cautiously optimistic, I corrected. Not every first contact involves getting thrown across a public space. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? It made quite an impression. I grinned at her. Though I admit, your diplomatic skills have improved since then. She growled playfully, a sound I now recognized as affectionate rather than threatening. As have your survival instincts. You duck much faster now. As the ship entered orbit around our destination, I reflected on the strange path that had brought us here. A smile misinterpreted. A cultural misunderstanding with galaxy-wide implications. An ancient genetic plan finally coming to fruition. I just wanted to buy parts for my ship, I mused. echoing words I'd said many times over the past year. Tharka's massive hand enveloped mine, her touch gentle despite her strength. And I just wanted to save my species from extinction. It seems we both got more than we bargained for. Mira's voice came over the ship's communication system, interrupting the moment. If you two have finished your sentimental reflection, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It seems they've detected our approach and are curious about our genetic signatures. I exchanged a look with Tharka, seeing my own excitement mirrored in her amber eyes. Another compatible species. Another piece of the ancient puzzle. Another step in the journey we'd begun with a smile in a crowded marketplace. Tell them we come as friends, I replied, with a story they might find interesting. As our ship descended toward the waiting civilization below, I reflected that while I never did get those replacement parts for my old vessel, what I found instead was infinitely more valuable. A connection that spanned species, a purpose larger than myself, and a partner who, despite our differences, complimented me in ways I never could have imagined. And if she occasionally threw me across a room during combat training, well, that was a small price to pay for being part of the most significant genetic reunion in galactic history. Ready? Tharka asked as the landing sequence initiated. I smiled at her, deliberately showing my teeth in the gesture that had started everything. Always,